Hi, I'm David Goforth with Cooperative Extension Successful Gardener. Last time we looked at preparing the soil. We've looked at soil testing in the past. Once you get a soil test, you can use that information to prepare your soil and get it ready to plant, and we then move on into the regular planting. I'll show you the way I do it today with several things. With small seeded things like tomatoes, I will normally plant them in a flat and then move them into a single tray like this. This is some I've grown for this year right here. With the larger seeded things like your squash, and in the case of this is watermelons, I will put them into a direct seed them into this pot here, and then I'll take them from that pot to the field. Whereas the tomatoes is sort of a two-step system, this is just a one-step system right here. To begin with, I'll take a container like this, and the reason I'll do it by here instead of in the field, I'll show you how to do it in the field, but a lot of times I'll do it here because the seeds are fairly expensive sometimes, and you don't get that many seed, and you get better results of putting individual seeds here than you do in the field. In the field, you have to put down 3 or 4 or 5 seeds to try to make sure that you get something up. Here, it's not a problem. You can get it. If you don't come up in one, you can plant it and get it right when you go to the field. So that's normally the reason we do this. The other thing is to get it a little bit earlier. We can do this inside the house in a window, a south-facing window, and we can have things ready to go here long before you can even plant them in the field. So to get this right here, the first step is to put some soil in the pot. You can see I use regular potting soil here, and this is a mix. There's several different brands, but you want to get a fairly high quality mix. And there's a lot more science that goes on in here than is very obvious. They will actually separate these things out and then blend back the various peat mosses to get the right size, to get the water holding capacity and everything right here. I know that our grandmothers and them just went and got some woods dirt, which worked very poorly, but it's all they had. They had to make it work. We can do a lot better than that. Some people want to try to mix some compost in here, and you could probably get by with mixing in, a fourth or a third of this with compost. The thing about compost is it promotes some of the diseases that are very rough on young seedlings, such as Rhizoctonia dampening off. Whereas your peat moss sort of inhibits those same fungi, and you have less problems planting in peat moss than you would planting into pure compost. Once I get it packed in here, I want to get it wet to begin with, so I will water it. Make sure that the water does go down and soak into the mix. Sometimes your mix gets a little bit hydrophobic where it will shed water, and the water will just sit on top, beat up, and then find a route down and not get it wet. In this case, it's gotten pretty wet. At that point, I'll go through here and just make a hole right here. I've got a couple of examples of seed here. These are some white cucumber seeds that I've actually saved from cucumbers I've grown myself, and then I do have squash that I've purchased. You can use either example. Normally when I've got my own seed, I may put in a couple per hole because I'm not really worried about the number of seeds as much. And I'll be more sure that one will come up in each hole. I may be only getting 80% germination, but generally putting 2 per pack there will give me plenty. Once I get the seeds in there, what I'll simply do is water this, and this will wash the top over the seeds. Of course, if your memory's like mine, it's a good idea to label this. I've got some Venetian blinds here, or little mini blinds that I have used. Use that one once on that side, so use it again here with the vegetable. Then I've got to put this into a warm place. Normally, things that like to grow at about 70 degrees, such as tomatoes or cucumbers, will germinate around 80 degrees very well. Watermelons actually like 80 or 75 degree temperature to grow, and they'll actually grow on up about 85 degrees to get the best germination on things like watermelon, but I've been able to do it here in a solar greenhouse with no problem. It will probably be a week or so before these things start popping up. Really the only problem at this stage with these is you've got to watch for mice. Mice can get in here sometimes and chew these. Not likely to be a problem in a house, but in a greenhouse sometimes I've seen that to be a problem. I will normally make sure that I don't have a lot of mice around before I've set several trays of this into the greenhouse. But basically set that there. You will need to continue to water it. It doesn't need to be standing in water. It's just water vapor is what makes the seed come up. But I will normally water this. This is designed to be watered about once a day until you get your seeds up to the point where you want to take them to the field. There's some other things I will transplant directly in the field, and some seeds I will seed directly in the field. So let's go look at those two options right now. These tomato plants here are fairly good plants if you're trying to buy something. You don't want something that's overgrown, something that's already showing blooms out here, or something that looks like it's been stunted or anything. These things are wide open, they're ready to go into the field. They're not quite to the first bloom yet, so they'll pop on up, get that first bloom fairly quickly. But this is a good plant right here. And of course the other thing you look at is you want a good root system on it, and you can pop it up like that. So here I've got the field that this one may be a situation where you could get a neighbor to come in and plow it up, or you could rent a tiller and get something plowed up at the beginning of the season, and then you can sort of work with it with hand tools on through the year. So this has already been plowed up here. The soil's in fairly good shape as far as the fertility, so I'm not going to worry about fertility at this point in time. I think there's fertilizer in the soil. You can come in at this point in time, you could put fertilizer down deep in the hole and then cover it up a little bit and put the plant above that. That's sort of a way to do it if you've wound up and got to this point without getting very good fertile soil. But you don't want to get too much fertilizer in there. And here, in this case, again, I think the fertility is about right in the soil already. So I'm going to just go ahead and plant. The first thing to do is to pop the plant out of the container, and sometimes you can again, if you tug on it, you better know what you're doing. Sometimes you'll rip the plants out by tugging on them like that. There's sometimes when the plants are a little bit harder to get out, and you almost have to turn them over and tap on the bottom to get them out like that. I have found that if you don't water them a little bit, they will be a little bit drier. They'll come out sometimes easier with a little bit dryness than they will if they've just been watered. Sometimes that don't seem to make a difference. But sometimes you get them all loose like that. But I'm ready to go here, and want to get my spacing right. Again, you can go to our online resources and find the spacing. With peppers here, I've got these hot peppers about 1 foot apart. I'd want to put tomatoes about 2 foot apart, and just dig a small hole here, drop the plant into it like this. And now, if I was going on down the line, I would continue to put my plants in and have them like this. This is the critical point here, is you want to put some water on this right here. And get the water here, water it fairly good. Let that water soak on down into the ground. Now, if I was doing this on down, I'd actually just go on water on down, and that would give me the time for it to soak in. But I'm going to wait just a minute here and allow it to soak in at this point in time right here. Once it's soaked in, you can come back and pull the soil together right here up around the plant. You want this to actually be dry right here, because you're trying to break the capillary action between that water you put in there and the top of the soil. And when you've done that, this will that water will hold in there fairly well. If you allow the top of it to be wet here, it'll evaporate out a lot faster. But the way we've got it right here, the soil will hold that moisture in there for a surprisingly long time. Hopefully we'll get some rain here in a day or so, or if I don't, I'll have to come back in here and water it then. But your initial watering, if you do it that way, it'll last for a pretty good while. Going down here, I'll plant one of these watermelons. With watermelons, I like to get about a 3 foot spacing. If the rows are this close together, you can vary that on down to maybe 2 foot if your rows are a little bit farther apart. Dig me a hole here and pop a watermelon in. Again, on this one, it's the roots are not quite as well formed here, or whatever. I just know from experience that I really need to flip this one over and push on the bottom and hold it like this to make sure that I don't damage the roots. And pop that one in again, I'll show you how to water in here using a can. Just take a 5-gallon bucket with an old food can is what we did for years. Gotten fancy here recently with a watering can, but that will do it right there. Allow that to soak in. Now, I typically do not put fertilizer in this, but we'll fertilize it one last time with a soluble fertilizer. I'll do that the last day I water before I come to the field. But here we're ready to go again with this. Get it upright, put it over here, and that's ready to go. So this is how we would transplant a watermelon that we had direct seeded into a container, get it in the soil, get it ready to go. We can also put the seed directly into the soil here in the garden. This is one reason I don't like this, is because it's a little bit harder to control the weeds, a little bit longer time to control the weeds. That's already got to jump on the weeds. I can come in here, cultivate a couple of times, I'm good to go. But what I'll do is I'll fix the area here. This is, they call it a hill. It's got some raised on each side. You can raise it up more than that if you're starting with bare ground. Get you a couple of seeds out here, and normally I like to plant these seeds about 3 times deeper than they are thick. And so spring I would push them down into the ground about like that right there. And I like to sort of pack this down and try to capture any capillary action, establish any capillary action from down below. It's critical on this that you've got some soil moisture. We're almost too dry here for it to pop up a little bit of moisture, suck up the moisture, and then rot. It's better if you had a little bit more moisture than this, or a little bit less moisture and wait for a rain. But I'm trusting the squash would know what to do in a situation like we've got right here. But that's basically a squash plant there. Squash is fairly quick and easy to plant, direct seeding, and the seed can be fairly cheap on squash. So sometimes I'll do it this way, particularly when I'm not trying to rush the season. Let's go take a look at another situation where you can plant tomatoes. What I've got here is a little bit different situation than what we typically see in a garden, but I'm working with it here. This is landscape fabric, a fairly tight woven landscape fabric. I put it down several years ago. That piece over there I actually put down 19 years ago. And then I've come by here and I've dropped a little bit of compost on top here that I'll tuck underneath the hole here. So there's my compost. I've actually got a small tree coming there. I'm going to pop that out of the ground. A maple tree or something. And I'll put a plant right here. Normally I've got some earthworms. Anytime I'll do that, right there's my earthworms. I've got earthworms going up and down. The earthworms will take the compost on into the ground, and this will be a situation, almost a no-till situation, a very minimum tillage situation, that I can put a watermelon into it and show you a picture of what I expect it to look like later on in the year. Then I would go to the next one and do the same thing. See, there's 3 earthworms right there. They're doing the job of getting this organic matter down to where it needs to be. The fact that we've got drip irrigation underneath here, right here's my drip irrigation tube right here, this allows us to do a little bit different on the watering here. I'll normally wait till I get it in like now, and then I'll come in and just water from the top. It does take a little bit more water than what we were using in the bare ground field situation to begin with, but we'll get this water in here. Need to make sure that we get enough water down to where the roots are at, and that will stand right there until we can get the drip irrigation going. Let's look at some tomato plants that we planted a little while back. We're getting ready to start pruning on them and staking them. We've planted these tomatoes here a week or so ago, and they're starting to get what we call suckers right here within the axil of the leaf, and taking that sucker out will allow the plant to come on a little bit earlier. It's not critical, it's not necessary, you don't have to do it, but I've taken 3 suckers out there, and that will channel more of the energy into the plant here, and it'll come on up and produce just a little bit faster because it's got more energy. The sucker on a tomato plant is this part right here that's growing within this leaf axil here. And if you let it go, it would come all the way up and would actually set fruit. So it's not a problem if you left it there. You can just get earlier fruit by taking this off and channeling the energy into the main plant here. So this is the part that we would pop off right here. There's the part that's removed. Actually, when they're that small, you can't do a whole lot with them, but if they get out about 3 or 4 times this big, you could actually root those and start you a new tomato plant if you wanted to. Now let's take a look at a tomato plant that I planted somewhat earlier and that is a little bigger. This plant here is a little bit older plant and it's got a little bit larger suckers. You can see this sucker here from the leaf axil. This is actually big enough to root. If a person wanted to, you could take this tomato sucker here and go put it in potting media, keep it moist, and it will should root on you. The ones we had a while ago were just a little bit too small to root. But I've taken this one out. I've got another sucker here that I'm going to pop out. And coming on up the plant, I just continue to sucker it as I go up. Now when you get up here towards the top, a lot of people will quit when they get up to the first bloom, but you can continue to sucker them if you want to. Here we've got, you want the one with the bloom on it stays, the one without is what you pop off. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell, and I've seen inexperienced gardeners pop the top off, which is not the best thing to happen. It's not irrevocable. It will continue to come out some way, but you're better off if you leave the one with the bloom on it, allowing it to come on up. And there will be another sucker on this side eventually, and it will develop up. The tomato plants are sort of weak, recumbent like this. They prefer to be staked a little bit for best results. Get your tomatoes off the ground, like I've staked this one right here, or actually put a cage around this one right here and brought it on up, allowing two to develop on this, and I'll be taking out some of these suckers as they continue to develop. Let me show you how I've got this system set up right here. This is actually just plain old mulch, plastic mulch. You could buy some in a roll like that. I've got the drip irrigation underneath it, and that gives me a little bit warmer soil to begin with, controls my weeds, makes my life a little bit easier, and this way I can water the plant can take off. I'll be able to produce tomatoes right here, fairly good shape. What I've showed you today is that there are several different ways that you can do this gardening. Different ways of planting, transplanting, different ways of preparing your soil. All of these are valid methods of growing your own food in your own yard. If you have any questions about home vegetable garden, give me a call at the office. And until next time, plan and plant for a better world.